Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Oh my gosh, guys. I, I just have to gush about this book and I can't wait to do it. So I'm going to dispense with my normal intro, which is, welcome you guys back to my channel and all that good stuff. You know I'm happy to have you here, but I just have to get into this book. And so let's get right to it. Hyperion is the first book in the Hyperion Cantos, which I believe is 4 books total by Dan Simmons. And it is just a brilliant science fiction novel. Now, I would almost place it in a literary sci-fi category, if that's a thing. I don't know if that's even a genre, but if it is, this definitely takes the cake. It is very, very character driven, just amazing and flowing prose at different points in the book, and it just does such a wonderful job of immersing you into not so much the world, but more so the characters in the world. You get little glimpses of the world throughout the novel, but it's more about the characters. And I'll go into that a little bit more here in just a few minutes. But I'll just let you know, I am ranking this really high. I mean, this has to be my second favorite science fiction novel under Dune. And I can't give it the number one spot because Dune is still there for me. Yeah, I'm a Dune fanboy, but Hyperion is a very, very close number 2. So let's get into the characters. And I'll try my best not to give too many spoilers here. But essentially, the story follows 7 different characters who are on a pilgrimage to visit an intergalactic, interdimensional being known as the Shrike. And very few people are chosen for these pilgrimages, and they are accompanied on the voyage by a member of the Shrike Church. It's basically a cult that worships the Shrike, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what the Shrike is and what it's like in a little bit here. But essentially, these 7 characters are on this voyage. One of the 7 characters is the priest of the Shrike cult, and he is there to be an emissary of sorts and to hopefully introduce them to the Shrike. And they each come with their own agendas for why they want to come before the Shrike. They have a plea that they want to make to the Shrike for something that's important to them, and it's just really, really interesting. So let's talk about the Shrike first. The Shrike is still very mysterious to me, and I have to say I still don't know a whole lot about the Shrike, even after reading this first book. Completing the book, I still didn't know a whole lot, but what I do know is it's an intergalactic, interdimensional being, like I said, and it's a terrifying being. We'll just put it that way. I can't even do it justice the way it was described in the book. I mean, there were points in the book where the descriptions of the Shrike were just so picturesque. You literally felt like you were standing there looking at the Shrike, but even now it's hard for me to personally describe. But it's this metallic, it has this metallic silvery skin of some sort. It has 4 arms, it has numerous blood red eyes in its skull, if you can call it a skull. And it is very definitely an alien creature. It's not of Earth, and it travels through time, primarily backward in time. It's from the future and it's traveling backward in time via a collection of burial sites known as the Time Tombs. And it's not clear if it's kind of like a vampire creature where it sleeps in the tombs and then wakes up and starts going on its rampage and stuff like that and just killing people brutally. And it's not clear if there are other Shrikes as well, but we're only told about the one, and there may be others of its race that live in some of the other tombs. It's just not really clear. But basically, anyone who is unfortunate enough to be caught in the anti-entropic fields can suffer time loss, de-aging, a whole bunch of different things. But there are people that visit the tombs and they go on these religious pilgrimages, and this pilgrimage is supposed to be the last of the pilgrimages that is going to happen that these 7 people are on. So this takes place in the, I think it said 27th century. And there's a lot of talk about old Earth. Earth has since died off or become completely uninhabitable. And humanity has traversed all the furthest reaches of space and taken up habitation on other worlds. One of which I think is a planet called Endymion. The one that this book focuses on is Hyperion. It is a planet that has a very unique heritage in the poetry of John Keats. And I won't get too much more into that because you find out more about that later in the story. But it's kind of based on that whole idea of John Keats' poetry, John Keats' Hyperion sonnet. And it's just a really, really engrossing tale. Each of these 7 characters has something in their past that they've kept secret, that they buried deep within them, and they are going on this pilgrimage to hopefully be relieved of the burden on their souls. And so let's talk about the characters for just a minute. There are 7 of them, as I mentioned. One is a general consul to the hegemony, which is it's a collection of planets. It almost gave me a similar vibe to the Federation of Planets from Star Trek lore, but it's not quite so much because it's more of a fascist or dictatorship of sorts. It's one conglomerate of planets that gradually usurps and assimilates other planets into its fold to form this empire of sorts, this galactic empire. So it's really fascinating. And the consul, he's one of the higher ups in the administrative branches of the hegemony, and he has a lot of mystery about him. We don't actually hear his tale until the very end, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. But he's a very, very interesting character, and when you finally get to hear his story, it's brutal and it's raw and it's beautiful, and oh my gosh, character work in this story just blew my mind. So all of these characters, they've sat down at this table, they're on this voyage, and they kind of drew straws of sorts. They each took numbers, who's going to tell their story first and everything. And the first person we hear from is a priest of the now ancient and decrepit Catholic religion. So he's a Catholic priest, and he's been in search of his mentor and his predecessor, who got lost in the reaches of space, presumably on Hyperion, and his story goes in to tell the story of his predecessor, and then we find out later, because of that, why he's going on this specific mission. And just his story is really, really fascinating, but it's not the best story. It's not the best story of any of them by any means. Another character in the story is a war hero, General Cassad. He's a very high-ranking military strategist and general, and he has been terrorized in different ways by the Shrike, and he is on a mission of vengeance to eventually kill the Shrike. That's his whole goal. And you'll find out more if you read the book, so that's not really a spoiler. It's just more of a foreshadowing, because you need to find out why he wants to do this, and so you're just going to have to read the book. So we've got the war hero, we've got the private investigator, Braun Lamia. She is a really fascinating character. She has her own reasons for making the pilgrimage to the Shrike, and it starts out with her telling her story about one of her clients that she starts an investigation with, and she comes to know him on a deeper level, and events that unfold between him and her cause her to want to make this pilgrimage to the Shrike. There's also a poet who if there's any humor in the story, and there's a lot of humor, I shouldn't say that, but the most humor in the story comes from the poet, because he's just crass, he's vulgar, he's brutal, he's mean, he's annoying. I mean, it's just everything that makes you love to hate a character, you find it in this poet. It's just absolutely hilarious. I had a blast reading him, and he's got his own story that involved love and tragedy and all the good things that would make up a good tragic poem, right? It's all there in his story, and he's got his own reasons for going to visit the Shrike, and particularly because he has written a series of novels in poetic form of sorts, telling this story that he just cannot seem to finish and complete the way he wants to, because he's lost his muse, and he's hoping that he will find his muse in the Shrike. So it's just but you have to read it. He is a brilliantly written character. So the next one would be the Jewish father who is on this pilgrimage with a little baby and is looking to visit the Shrike to find out what has happened with his daughter. And I won't go into any more detail than that, but I will tell you, of all the stories in the book, his story had me in tears. I mean, if you are a crier, you better have a box of tissues, because his story is heart-wrenching. It is just heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. If any of you have daughters, have a box of tissues. I'm telling you. See, I'm already tearing up. And I just was floored by his story, and just an absolutely brilliant character. The seventh character of the voyage is the priest of the Shrike cult, and we don't actually get to hear his story, and I'm not going to tell you why, but events unfold that prevents him from sharing his story. And I think that was intentional. I don't think he really wanted to share his story, for one, because he's part of the Shrike cult. He's probably loyal to his master. And it's just not part of his plan to really tell the others what's going on with him. Even though they all agreed that they would share their stories, he just conveniently doesn't end up having to tell his. And I'm not going to say any more. You have to read the book. And I really mean that, folks. If you like science fiction at all, you have to read this book. It is a sprawling epic in such a small book because you're visiting different worlds. It's almost like there's an eighth character too, because a large part of the Catholic priest's story is about his predecessor, and you get to know his predecessor on such an intimate level that it's almost like he's the eighth main character in the book, even though he's really not. But you just get to know him so deeply that I would consider him an eighth main character. And you get to know little bits about this world that make you want more. So I'm really excited to read the second book in the series eventually, because the ending especially, the ending was a complete cliffhanger. I mean, it just ended. That if that's the one flaw that I would say about this book, it's that it just left you on a complete cliffhanger. And I'm sure that was intentional. It makes you want to read the other books. But I was like, so I spent all this time learning about these characters and their stories and why they want to see the Shrike, and then it just ends. But in a good way. It's not a bad thing. I wasn't extremely upset about it because I do plan to read the other books. It was a very fitting ending. It just didn't end the way that I expected it to, because it definitely makes you want more. You have to read the other books eventually. So, but it was a good ending. It was satisfying. I enjoyed the way it ended. I was just like, oh man, what a bummer. Because now I have to go pick up the other book to find out what happens. But it's not one of those books that is a standalone. I would not read it as a standalone book. You definitely need to read it as the first book in the series, and just go into it knowing that. But if you like character development especially, these characters are amazingly written. Each of their stories, in its own way, is brutal and raw and heart-wrenching and lovable and hateable in some respects. And the technology in the story is very, very believable. It's not that far-fetched compared to where we are now in our technological era in the 21st century. It's not that far-fetched to where it wouldn't be believable that we could get there, which is interesting because you would think that a book set in like the 27th century would be way out of our league technologically, but the author kept it very, very believable and close enough to the technology that we have now, but far-fetched enough that we know where we can get. And not only that, the repercussions of what happens when we get there technologically, and what it can do to the natural order of the universe, and what happens when you tamper with time, and what happens when you tamper with space travel, and what happens to individual families when they are separated by time gaps because of time travel. You just have all these questions that are raised about ethics and, whether or not it's really a good idea to explore these different facets of technology, and the pros and the cons of it. And it brings up all these questions, and it really makes you think. And I thought that was really a great thing about this book. So yeah, I highly recommend Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Even though it ended on a cliffhanger, I still give it a 5 dragon rating. And yes, I'm starting a new rating system on this channel. I am giving it 5 spectacled dragons. 5 speckled... I'm going to stop trying to say that because I'm getting all tongue-tied. But yes, 5 dragons. And yes, that does equal 5 stars for those of you that don't care for dragons and just want a regular 5-star rating. Yes, I give it 5 stars. But for me, it's 5 dragons. So if you don't like that, tough. That's how I'm doing it from now on. I'm doing the dragon thing because I love dragons, and I have my dragon as my mascot on my channel, so I want to put him to good use. So let me know what you think. Have you read Hyperion? Did you enjoy it as much as I did, or did you not like it at all? And let me know in the comments why. I would love to dialogue with you about that. Make sure that you let me know specific reasons and specific things, if you remember them, about why you did or didn't like it. Maybe there were things that you caught in the story that I didn't even notice, and you can let me know about that too. This would definitely be a book that I think I would reread at some point, but I need to continue on with the series first before I come back and reread it. But it's one of those books that I think you would get more out of a second time around, because you kind of know the story and you can focus on some of the more minute details of it. So in my next video, I am going to be talking about all the book series that I am definitely planning on reading. If you didn't catch my last video, I talked about the book series that I do not plan on reading whatsoever. And I will leave a link in the screen captures at the end of this video so that you can go check that video out. I'll leave a link below in the description as well. But next week, I will have a video talking about all the series that I do plan on reading in the future, whether that be the near future or sometime in the future. At some point, I will get to them. So make sure you check out that video next week, and make sure to do all the little stuff here on the screen if you haven't already. I've got my magic fingers working, so you got to pay attention to this, right? And I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to read more books. Please read Hyperion. I'll talk to you in the next video. Have a great one, guys. Bye.